6060973. So what am I going to ask you this afternoon? This is not a mere incidental question. This is pretty pivotal to all our futures and all our presents and all our hopes and dreams. So here it goes. How strongly, lovely LBC listener, are your sights set on Britain achieving net zero by 2050? Maybe you just think I've posed an idiotic question. Maybe you're convinced that attaining net zero is vital for the planet's very survival and therefore our own survival, the survival of the human race. So in asking the question, maybe I'm saying, so do you want the human race to survive or not? And you think that sounds utterly idiotic. Maybe you think questioning reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050 to limit global warming to manageable levels, questioning it, the actual question, is not only foolish, but even irresponsible, ridiculous, even dangerous. Maybe you think there's no point debating whether we ought to achieve this goal because anyway, we're bound by the UK's Climate Change Act of 2008. This act, you'll probably know about this, established a long-term legal framework for reducing carbon emissions, making the UK the first country to do so. The target to achieve net zero by 2050 is legally binding. You may be convinced that any other pathway is quite simply a direct route to self-destruction. On the other hand, though, you might endorse Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch in what's been billed her biggest departure from net zero yet. This week, she's going to unveil a pledge to extract as much oil and gas from the North Sea as possible. Of course, her speech will be directly compared with Donald Trump's exhortation to drill, baby, drill. Badenoch will vow to abolish swathes of environmental restrictions on fossil fuel extraction. Her model, of course, is the wealth-creating approach taken by Norway, which has recently received what the Telegraph calls the good news that its operator Aker BP has discovered a field that could potentially yield the equivalent of 134 million barrels of North Sea oil. Badenoch proposes that the North Sea Transition Authority drops the word transition, loses its obligation to assist in attaining net zero, and refocuses its attention on maximising the extraction of oil and gas. And Reform UK has already pledged to reverse the ban on new drilling as day one priorities. They're going to do it urgently alongside stripping back subsidies for renewals. Some pundits call these decisions common sense approaches. What do you think they are? President Trump, you will remember, said he would harness the liquid gold under our feet in his drive to raise American living standards. He is perplexed and confused by what he calls Britain's love of windmills. We don't call them windmills, we call them wind farms, but he thinks they're downright weird, and he doesn't understand our unwillingness to make use of our natural resources, the ones with which he thinks we are blessed. So I wonder whether you agree with President Trump. Critics have called Labour's approach to net zero, spearheaded by the single-minded Ed Miliband, self-indulgent. Are you with Kemi Badenoch? We must emulate Norway and take advantage of the remaining supplies of North Sea oil? Or are you concerned that if we did so, it would be inconsistent with net zero targets, it would cause pollution, it would cause harm to marine ecosystems, and maybe you're worried that emissions from burning existing and planned global oil and gas reserves already exceed the carbon budget needed to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, meaning new North Sea fields are incompatible with climate goals. So is it time for the British to get on board with drill, baby, drill, as Badenoch says? Or should we resist it with every fibre of our being? 0345 6060973. Should we drill, baby, drill? Get on the phones. I'm sure you feel very strongly one way or another. You must. It's not something you can feel nothing about. You've got to feel something about this. It does materially and manifestly affect us whichever way you view it. So what do you think? 0345 6060973. Let's discuss it with the independent environmental analyst, Dr. Roger Harrabin. Hello, Dr. Harrabin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm all right, thank you. So this is going to be a grandstanding speech by Kemi Badenoch. Maybe you could just summarise for us, if you will, what she's getting at here, and then give us your view.
Okay, well, if you just look back as to how this concern about climate change started, it was Mrs. Thatcher, a well-known Conservative leader, who first saw the massive problems that would be posed by climate change. Moving on, it was Theresa May, Conservative leader, who actually committed the UK to net zero policies, which would lead to an almost total cut in emissions by 2050. But this issue was always dependent on a consensus across Parliament. It was always going to be too difficult if there was fractious behaviour between different parties. But that is exactly what we've seen over the past couple of years, where the Conservatives and Reform have decided to break off to the right, adopt the culture wars narrative proposed by President Trump, and push away the net zero requirements. So what you said...
So hang on, before you go any further, I'm going to ask you, and you know what I'm going to ask you, what do you mean by the phrase culture wars narrative? To many people of many generations, that is so obfuscating and confusing a phrase. They have absolutely no idea what you're getting at. Others probably use it themselves several times before breakfast. So what does it mean, a culture wars narrative? What is that?
Yes, so, President Trump won the election based on a coalition of different groups who didn't appear to have very much in common with each other than a kind of a thread that the ruling party and ruling politicians were behaving in a way that they didn't understand and they didn't approve of. Things like, if you think of transsex narratives, for instance, people have a gut feeling about that. This is not a traditional electoral issue. And climate change has been dragged by the American right, funded directly by the fossil fuel industry, into this, in which people are saying, the politicians on the right are saying, look, clearly it's ridiculous. We have this extremely expensive and valuable stuff sitting underground. It's only responsible for us to drill for it. And that has now seeped into the UK from Reform and now increasingly through Kelly Badenoch.
Right, and now I'd like your view, Dr. Harriman, on whether that's true. Because when you put it that way, whether you're simply quoting Donald Trump rather well, or whether you're putting it out there so that people are horrified at the very notion, it sounds pretty convincing. You know, we've got it. It's worth an enormous amount of money. We pay a huge amount. I think we pay more than any other country in Europe for fuel. It's already there. We're lucky enough to be in that particular part of the world where we can benefit financially and in every other way from it. So why wouldn't we drill, maybe drill?
Yeah, that is incredibly persuasive.
Yeah.
The whole climate narrative really was always going to prove extremely difficult, as I said earlier.
But sorry, well, yet again, I have to stop you I have to dismantle what you say one more time. You say, when you say the whole climate narrative, we all know the word narrative is a fashionable word. It's used all the time. All it means is story. So when you say the climate narrative, what do you mean? You mean it's not a true story? It is a true story. It's a story that we can interpret in any way we fancy and have, as you say, a gut reaction? Or what the heck do you mean by the climate narrative?
I mean, the government's decision and other governments' decision to push towards net zero emissions, zero meaning almost all emissions, and we would capture any emissions that we couldn't stop in the first place. That's what I meant.
Right.
But it's extremely difficult to achieve. I mean, even people with goodwill admit that it looks absurdly ambitious. But the problem is, we are actually fighting the natural world here, because there are major scientists now who will tell you that 2050 is much too far in the future to achieve zero emissions. We should be doing it now. And you just have to look round at the world to see the wildfires and floods all around the world to know that climate change isn't in the future. It is already.
So paint a picture for us. If we don't achieve it by 2050, and you've just said it looks very, very difficult, almost impractical, and there's a kind of ideology against it, and there's a kind of tidal wave of feeling which is common sense, whatever that is. If it were to prevail, we would just kind of forget about it and just get on with doing what we already do. We wouldn't even think about it very much. You know, people are already sick of it. There's kind of climate change fatigue among certain people and certain groups of political theorists. So if we don't achieve it by 2050, what can we, and I'm going to say this in inverted commas, of course, look forward to? What do you think the vista will be?
Well, I think it's going to be very unpleasant, and what we've seen so far among scientists and researchers is that they seem to have consistently underestimated the speed with which climate change would come upon us. I mentioned earlier the wildfires and floods, and the potential, I should say, it's only a potential and maybe a small percentage chance that we could lose major ocean currents which keep us warm, and we could be plunged into a much colder climate than we're in at the moment. So we're in a bizarre situation now where we have to prepare for extreme heat, which is going to get much worse, particularly in cities like London, and potentially extreme cold, and to plan for them both at the same time. At the moment, it's very difficult to put any plans in place if Labour it's consistently looking over its shoulder. As we've seen that on other issues, Labour's looking over its shoulder at reform. And reform is rubbishing the agenda. And reform has one major weapon on its side, which is that the arguments it's proposing seem to be really reasonable and simple. And why wouldn't we follow them? And as the Labour Party said a long time ago, it's very easy to look at things that appear to be simple and make simple solutions. Actually, these are very difficult issues. I mean, if you look at Aberdeen, where Kemi Badenoch is about to make her big speech, I mean, that's a city that depends on oil and gas and has done in the past. And this government are actually trying, and the previous government, to be fair, are trying to have a kind of inclusive move away from fossil fuels, which wouldn't just put a metaphorical bomb through the middle of Aberdeen's economy. And so that's why the talk on Wednesday is being held up there.
So our net zero by 2050 pledge is being, isn't it, zealously kind of adhered to or engineered by Ed Miliband. He's in charge of it. He doesn't seem to be the kind of bloke that you can dislodge. He seems to be kind of doggedly carrying on. But I think many people listening might be wondering and might be concerned about all the other countries in the world, and lots of them far bigger than us and using far more energy and fossil fuels than us, that aren't on board in the same way. And if we were to achieve it, and you've already said it's going to be very, very difficult, might even be impossible, but if we were to achieve it and the other countries were not to, would it not negate all our good offices? Would it not fail to save us and other planet? Would it be pointless?
Well, one of the things that could be said in the UK's favour internationally is that it has actually been a leader of this issue from the start. We're now seeing other countries with net zero targets, France, Germany, other European countries. Japan is moving towards the net zero target. Even in the USA, several states are moving towards net zero targets. So we're not on our own. That's wrong to say. It is right to say that the emissions of us and those other nations so far committed will be dwarfed by pollution from China and the USA.
Yes.
Absolutely. But it's fair to China, though, to mention that China is manufacturing and buying and using more renewables, wind and solar and batteries, than all of the rest of the major world together.
Okay, one more question. It may sound as if it comes from a 7-year-old, and if it does sound that way, forgive me. But last night, I think it was on Channel 5 last night, was a programme about the long hot summer, the drought of 1975 to 1976. And, there are varied views on whether this was an anomaly, whether this was a precursor, a sign that global warming was imminent, whether it was just a vagary, a strange, eccentric, quirk of the gods. Who knows, who knew? But what do you think?
Well, this has been a question that's long been asked. Here we have a natural disaster in this place or the other place. How do we know that it's anything to do with climate change? And a new branch of science has been set up called attribution science, where the scientists work out what the likelihood would have been if there had not been so many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere of that natural, in inverted commas, natural event occurring. And you're seeing consistently, well, one thing we do know is that hotter, warmer weather is expected and completely in touch with what's happening with the climate, because the warm atmosphere can hold more water, and therefore when it rains heavier. So we know that, and it's just a question of deciding how much of a percentage of a chance of a likelihood there would be.
So, Dr. Harriman, if you could stand on a soapbox opposite Kemi Badenoch as she makes this speech this week, which essentially boils down to drill, baby, drill, doesn't it? What would you say if you could shout back? I know you're too polite to do that, but if you could shout back one, humdinger of a one-liner to take the wind out of her sails, what would you say?
Yeah, well, I'm not supposed to be in the shouting business, but I think I would say have a word with Theresa May.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Roger Harriman there, independent environmental analyst. It's over to you, lovely LBC listener, for your calls. The number is 34560 60973. Do you accept that global warming has become a sort of political hot potato, that there is a narrative, that there is a culture war around this? Or do you think it's very simple? Don't achieve net zero by 2050. Our very survival is in peril. The survival of the planet is in peril. You heard Dr. Harriman say the whole place could go freezing cold. We won't be able to keep warm. It would be like living going through something equivalent to another ice age, which I don't fancy, which seems a bit weird since we keep talking about global warming. But maybe you understand this stuff. Maybe you're already sick of it. And maybe when Nigel Farage said, yeah, let's drill, and that Kemi Badenoch's going to say exactly the same thing in Aberdeen, who's the centre of the oil industry, you think, yeah, let's. We've got it. Let's make money out of it. Let's go for it. 03456060973. Where do you stand on net zero? I'm Vanessa Feltz. This is LBC and the time 3:18.
This is LBC.
With over 50 years' experience, at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
If I need an eye test, I don't go to Specsavers.
One thing you won't see at Specsavers is me.
Do I go? Yes! I think, no. Me, I don't go to Specsavers. Nor you, Speak.
Should have gone to Specsavers.
Hi, Specsavers. Here for your eye test.
They come to me instead. Come in, kettle's on.
If you can't go to Specsavers unaccompanied, we could come to you and see if you're eligible at specsavers.co.uk/home visits.
When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.
Life feels better with a smile. Banning Dental Group Clinics. Modern, comfortable, and affordable dentistry for all. See online for our price match promise. Keep on smiling.
Keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles with you.
banningdental.co.uk.
Here comes Steve, with the satisfied smile of a man who's checked me out at midday after a great night's sleep and a delicious unlimited brekkie. See the untamable bedhead hair, and if you look really close, you can see that properly well-rested glow, which can only mean one thing. Last night he slept at Premier Inn. Get better sleep for your money. Premier Inn. Rest easy. Breakfast subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Vanessa Feltz on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
And your calls coming in thick and fast, which I thank you. Let's go straight to Ed in Hazelmere. Hello, Ed. Thanks for ringing. Good afternoon. Oh, he's not there yet. It's what? We just need to get him up on the line, I think. Get him up in a minute. Is he there now? Yes, he is. Hello, Ed. Hi.
Hi, Vanessa. Hi, it's Ed Gamble. I'm the leader of the Climate Party.
Well, I'm glad you called, because this is...
And I was just on my way to London to do a television interview on the same topic, so I'm pleased to chat to you about it for a few minutes
Well, I'm
first.
glad we got in first with the topic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely.
So Kemi Badenoch's about to stand on a soapbox in Aberdeen and give this speech. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's either, from her perspective, either extremely clever or very stupid and very dangerous. I think it's probably very clever if she's auditioning for Deputy Leader of Reform in the future, in which case I think it's going to make Nigel feel very happy and she may well be in his good books. If she's actually trying to do what she says just occasionally when she's talking, which is stimulate our economy, it's remarkably stupid. We've been digging for gas now for around 60 years. It hasn't been hugely profitable for us. We haven't had vast exports, and it isn't going to drop the price of gas. But at the same time, we've got a massive opportunity with net zero. Roger Harrabin has talked about the science of it, but the economy of it. If we go for net zero, and decades earlier than we're proposing to, we could put 500 billion to 1.2 trillion pounds onto our economy annually. There is a massive global economy growing. We're at 7.9 billion is the 7.9 trillion is the international net zero economy at the moment, growing at 15% a year. It's going to be $14 trillion by 2030.
All right, let me stop you for 1 second to ask a few questions. How come if everything you say is the case, I have no idea whether your information is correct or incorrect. I don't have a dossier with all the answers with which I can fling different figures at you, I'm afraid. But if what you're saying is correct, why is it being represented to most of us that net zero is almost kind of, in fact, the word used today in the Telegraph was self-indulgent, that it's going to be a self-indulgent, incredibly expensive, effectively crusher and crucifier of the economy, because I think that is how, am I wrong to say that's how it's being represented? money, and you likened us to a bankrupt company, money that we may not have or probably haven't got, and each household will have to cough up. We're all going to end up having to fund it. How many years of investment, as you call it, will we have to make before we have those spectacular trillions of pounds worth of profits that you painted such a golden picture of? It sounded magnificent. How many years of financial sacrifice till we get the good stuff?
If we go for it, it can be done in 5 years. We're already projecting spending enormous amounts of money and investment over 25 years. But at the moment, we're not projecting a massive upside because we're doing it at the same speed as much as the rest of the world. If we were to take that money, spend it all now, however we get it, and that will not be mainly government money, it will be mainly private investment stimulated by good policy and government going first. Spend that money now, get it done ahead of the rest of the world, be the only G7 or G20 country to have got to net zero by 2030 or thereabouts, and we will then be the export country of the world for the following 50 to 20 years as everybody else goes there as well.
What does it say for the Conservative Party if you, at the Climate Party, Green, Conservative, centre-right political party, etc., are at odds with Kemi Badenoch, both preaching from completely different hymn sheets today?
Yeah, I mean, the other, well, I agree with you. I think, though, to try and take the left-right out of it, because I don't see any reason why this is really a left-right issue. We all want to grow the economy, and we all want an environment that our kids can live in the future, everybody, wherever they are.
Yes.
And what we need to do is get this left-right rubbish out of it, get on with the job, and see that, in fact, these two things are joined at the hip. There is a vast, vast economic opportunity. And why people like Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch talk down British ingenuity, talk down British innovation, talk down the strength of our economy, when we're still the fourth largest exporter in the world. Imagine if our shelves were lined with every single net zero product that's required by everybody else. Imagine how big our exports would be. We need to go for it right now.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad you got us in before your television interview. That's Ed Gemmill, Labour Councillor in Buckinghamshire, and he is, as you hear, chairman of the Climate Party, Green, Conservative, centre-right political party. Glad he called. Let's speak to Milo in Seven Sisters. Milo, how nice to hear from you. How are you?
Hi, Vanessa. Lovely to speak with you.
Good to speak to you.
So there's one thing that really kind of torpedoes this argument.
Yeah.
And that is to do with the fact that the oil and gas, one gets out of the North Sea, is subsidy. It's going to go directly onto our market. It's not going to be subsidised energy at home. And that means it won't actually have a material effect on British people's prices in terms of energy or any other fuel source that comes into the equation. And so while they may talk about all this drill, baby drill, we're not going to see the benefit of it. So that's the first point. The second point is more to do with Kemi Badenoch herself and the fate of the Conservative Party, which is that they are basically in the process of having a reverse takeover, and it would be better if that happened sooner rather than later, so that reformist policies can get the scrutiny they deserve, because ultimately they're all uncosted, and we need to start seriously interrogating what those policies mean.
Okay, so when you say uncosted, we heard just then, again, the whole list of figures. I mean, they were dazzling, sparkling, enticing figures involving trillions of pounds of profit. I said, but hang on a minute, it's going to cost us an absolute, utter fortune. We haven't got to get to that, isn't it? And he said a very sensible thing about, but that's investment in something that ultimately will net us these magnificent golden dividends. What do you make of that? Milo.
And I think that's entirely correct, and I think there's definite, and I think that there's definite benefit to it. I think the real issue with this is that it does require the consensus that Ed Gemmill mentioned, because if you don't have it, then if you're investing money in the UK, you want the guarantee that if you're going to do a 10 or 20-year project, that it's not going to be reversed extreme. You've seen that with what's happened in the US, where there's been a complete reversal, and that's put a lot of companies in complete flux over all kinds of initiatives. And so we need to have that consistency of messaging across the main political parties. And by virtue of what Kemi Badenoch has done, that has basically smashed a big hole in our credibility.
And so as she stands and gives that speech, if you could stand in the soapbox opposite and yell something polite, obviously, nothing we can't say on the radio, but at her, what would you say? Got to be polite. Got to be your very best, most genteel.
Seriously look at... seriously look at your predecessors and the position and what they were trying to do, and actually don't just go down populist bandwagons, because if they want to vote for the original thing, they'll vote for reform anyway.
And when Dr. Roger Harriman talked about the culture wars, the kind of narrative, the climate change narrative and culture wars, what do you make of that phrase? Well, how would you explain that phrase? Because I think lots of people just don't know what that even is.
I don't think it's particularly helpful as a term. It extends across a whole gamut of issues, some which extend across gender and sexuality, and the others around the environment. It's a very much a catch-all portmanteau term. I find that basically you need to address the issues as you find them, and those may not align on a left-right split, dependent on you could be very gender critical, but you may not be that much of a fan of Debbie Bacon's climate policy, and those two are incongruous. But obviously taken as a whole, if they seem to be divisive issues, and the environment has again been seen as an easy way to be a divider between parties and divider between the right and the left, then that is actually very unhelpful for our wider political discourse, because it makes it a much more personal discussion rather than actually debating the substance, which is how do we get long-term cheaper, sustainable fuel in our economy, and also how can we become a world leader in those climate technologies and growing the economy as a whole. Whereas if you just divide people down the middle, particularly as a relatively small country in this, that we stand to lose out over the longer term.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for calling. Well, I'm taking your calls on all of this straight after the break. So I'll be speaking to Iris and Aberdeen and Tom and Angelo and everyone else. 0345 606 0973. I'm Vanessa Feltz. This is LBC. The time's 3:31, which means it's time for the news with Rachel Wright.
Schools across the UK will reopen tomorrow after the long summer holiday, and the Education Secretary is urging families to make sure their children go to class. Bridget Phillipson says she's deeply troubled by the levels of attendance. Nearly 1 in 4 children are persistently absent. Reform UK has rejected criticism by the Archbishop of York over their plans to reduce illegal immigration. The party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, says he's not concerned about the views of the church. The Chinese president and Indian Prime Minister have announced a deepening trust between their two countries. Speaking at a summit in China, Xi Jinping said they should be partners, not rivals. They head to the most populated countries and biggest economies in the world. LBC weather, scattered showers developing across much of the UK today, those heaviest in the west. Dry at times with some brighter spells, particularly in the east, a high of 22 degrees.
LBC.
With over 50 years' experience at Fidelity, we believe there's a difference between investing and being invested. Investing is having access to guidance, tools, and expert insights. Being invested means feeling confident about your future. Investing is choosing from a wealth of investment options. Being invested means focusing on your long-term goals. For ISAs, pensions, or advice, be truly invested with Fidelity. Go to fidelity.co.uk. Your capital is at risk. Terms apply.
The road stretches before you, but there's trouble ahead. Stationary cars. You're faced with a McDonald's side mission. Do you, A, join the ever-growing queue, or B, take the next exit and treat yourself to a glorious Mackey's?
Detouring to McDonald's.
Start your side mission today.
Summer's nearly over. It's time to get back to real life. Luckily, Cinch has got all the essentials sorted. And we're not talking about new textbooks. Let's see. The biggest range of cars to buy entirely online? Free 90-day warranty sorted. And VAT-free Cinch servicing at a Marshall store near you. Absolutely cinched it. Everything you need and not a pencil case in sight. Cinch it for yourself today. Visit cinch.co.uk. Comparison against equivalent retailers. Visit cinch.co.uk/range claim. Terms and exclusions apply.
Did you know you can get Santander cycles for 24 hours for £3.50? I spent the day feeling the morning breeze, rolling with mates, getting up, free-wheeling.
For £3.50, you can get 24 hours of unlimited 60-minute rides on Santander Cycles. Download the Santander Cycles app to find your nearest docking station. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Pedal by Additional charges apply for e-bikes. Other T's and C's apply.
When you're smiling.
Banning Dental Group clinics. With over 5,000 top-rated Google reviews. Keep on smiling.
This is LBC with Vanessa Feltz. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
We'll be coming straight back to our drill baby drill conversation in just a moment. Don't get bored waiting. Just hang in because we're coming to you very, very soon. Hang on the line. But before that, let's discuss this. The leaders of China and India say there is now deepening trust between them. That's after years of tension that includes a long-running border dispute. Why are we talking about this? Well, because there's about to be an international security summit, and we need to know what might be going on. It's called the SCO Summit. Let's discuss this with Will Geddes, the international security expert. Hello, Will. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about the summit, the SCO Summit. It's being described as largely symbolic, but is it more significant, more important than that?
Yeah, it is, Vanessa. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on
Lovely
the
to
show.
have you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, which really starts in earnest on the 1st of September, is a very concerning summit in so much as it's not pomp and ceremony. This is actually the major leaders, particularly in South Asia and Russia, who are getting together to basically discuss how they're going to trade, how they're going to cooperate, and how they're going to look into the future as a sort of united force.
Yeah.
What is particularly concerning, to a certain extent, and we can go into this in more depth, is that President Putin has also attended and seen very much shoulder to shoulder with President Xi Jinping and also President Modi.
So explain now why the concern is growing and what could
At the
transpire,
roundabout,
because you
take
said
the
we can go
first
into
exit.
greater depth. What do we need to know? What will you unpick for us?
Okay, so in brief summary,
now.
one thing that we really need to be concerned about is not so long ago, President Trump and President Modi were close allies and
Stay left.
lots of show and
Turn
dance
left.
around their relationship and moving forward. However, President
Turn
Modi
left.
of India has been purchasing cut price discounted oil from Russia, and so much so that it's even been attributed that the Ukraine conflict is President Modi's conflict. He's donating a lot of money to Russia for this cut price oil. Now, this has upset Trump sufficiently that he has now increased their tariffs from what was 25% to 50%. Now, that's not going to go down well with India, and the timing of this now,
At the roundabout,
the summit
take the
means
first
that he's
exit.
going to align himself more with Russia. He's going to probably continue with China. China doesn't care about the tariffs with President Trump, as we know. But what we're going to have is these three major forces in this part of the world which are going to be collaborating.
Right, so what are the possible permutations of that? Is there anything that we do to try and
Get ready to
past,
turn
or is it
right.
just inevitable that we have to wait and see what the ramifications are? What can happen?
Well, all sorts of ramifications, Vanessa, one of which is obviously the constant concern about the invasion of Taiwan. And Taiwan have also reached out to Australia to try and ask for their assistance and unifying them. Taiwan, remember, produces probably the vast majority of the world's computer chips. And China, who was very much a forward-striking force in terms of computer technology and also AI, for them to seize Taiwan, which we know has been in the offing for quite some time, would obviously put the rest of the world at considerable risk technology.
Recomputing. Turn right. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. At the roundabout, take the third exit. Exit now. Stay left, and then turn left. Turn left. You have arrived at your destination.
Dry at time with some brightest spells, particularly in the east.
enormous benefits with profound implications, not just for those young people, but for society. She writes in the Telegraph today, and this is what she says. This week, millions of children will walk through school gates for the first time. The statistics that landed on her desk this week make for sobering reading. And she also says that the previous government, the Conservative government, did not take this problem seriously. So she says this is only the tip of the iceberg. And these are the figures. 1 in 10 white children on free school meals were suspended last year, with suspension rates 5 times higher than their peers. They also have among the highest overall absence rates. They are swimming upstream against a staggering entrenched class divide that sees them disproportionately kicked out of education or not attending in the first place. She says, I will not shy away from telling the truth. They were failed by the previous government, and goes on to say absence leads to lower attainment and robs children of grades or attendance figures. It's generations of talent wasted, of young people locked out of the chance to contribute to our society and economy. Suspended pupils are 2.5 times as likely to receive unemployment benefits and 3 times as likely to receive health-related benefits. Pupils who are persistently absent earn £10,000 less by the time they're 28, and they're 4 times more likely to end up not in education. She says this dislocation has profound implications, not just for them, but for society as a whole. The dividing line, she says, in a very vivid phrase, run like scars across the country, with opportunity clustered in some places, while elsewhere entire communities are left behind. She says, in my region, the northeast, the percentage of white working class pupils is the highest in the country. It also has some of the country's highest absence and suspension rates. It's not a coincidence. In too many places outside London, young people struggle to see a route to success. Real change, she says, for white working class children means real change for the communities they're growing up in. After destroying these families' faith in the value of school, it is the job of the state to restore that faith in education. That's why our plan for change in kickstarting economic growth and raising living standards in every part of the country, breaking the link between background and success. We're already turning the tide on attendance. She says nearly 150,000 children are now back at school, and more than 5 million additional days of attendance have happened. But what she says is that parents need to get involved. They need to get involved in making sure that children go to school and also making sure that they behave once they get there. And she finishes like this. These children aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're somebody's daughter, someone's son. I won't rest until we have a school system and a country that fights for their future. So I'd love to hear your take on this one. 0345 6060973. What do we do to persuade parents that their children really must go to school? What do we do to persuade parents and children that education is your pathway to success, happiness, social mobility, integration, a decent living, all the things we're supposed to value